Welcome, everyone, to the Clocking Out Podcast, a show about people who share their own personal journey that include making bold choices to clock out of situations to follow their dreams of career fulfillment and to live their best, most authentic lives. I'm your host, Raymond, and this podcast could not be possible without the support of Careerminds. More about Careerminds after the show. Today, I'm excited to bring you Rob Lawless. I met Rob last year at an HR conference in Las Vegas where he shared his personal mission to spend 1 hour one-on-one with over 10,000 different people. Rob sees the world from an incredibly unique perspective. Over the last 8 years, he's met over 6,000 people from over 90 countries, sharing their stories on his Instagram, Rob's 10K Friends. I had the pleasure of being number 6346 of the 10K. Rob's been featured on Air with Ryan Seacrest, Your Morning, The Today Show, and The Kelly Clarkson Show. Rob's inspiring project showcases the value of intentional human connection and how every human interaction holds the potential to change your life. So without further ado, please enjoy Rob Lawless and his Clocking Out story. Rob, welcome to the podcast. It's great to see you.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. Good to see you again.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I was reflecting earlier today. It's been over a year since you and I first met at the annual HR conference in Las Vegas, where I attended your session.
Yeah.
And it was the first time I learned about your mission, which was to spend an hour with over 10,000 people to learn about their lives. And I said to myself, wow, I want to be one of those 10,000 people.
Yeah, that was cool. I'm just thinking about it now because we met in the speaker ready room at that little reception that they had as well. And how funny that we just were from the same area and we were on the other side of the country.
I know, right? We were all the way in Las Vegas and you said, I live in Philadelphia. And I said, we have to meet in person. And the crazy thing about the story is that was in June of last year, where we were at that conference in Las Vegas, and we just met like 2 months ago. So it took almost 10 months for us to do you interviewing me as one of your 10,000.
Yeah.
And, here we are 2 months later with you sharing your story on our podcast. So I really appreciate that. It's so fortuitous.
Yeah, it's funny. I have met with people that you've introduced me to before you and I had met officially for the project.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
oh, that's
Anna,
fantastic.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, I'm excited to hop in here, Rob. And like I always do, I like a little bit of the beginning. Why don't you share with our listeners where you're from, where you grew up, maybe a little bit about your family, your parents, any siblings you have, and we'll go from there.
So I grew up in Norristown, Pennsylvania, which is like an hour outside of Philly. So the Philly area, I grew up as the youngest of 3 kids. So I have an older sister who's 6 years older than me and a brother who's 2 years older than me. And yeah, I grew up in like the suburbs in a neighborhood where all the kids went to the same Catholic school 5 minutes down the road, and a lot of football in the backyards, basketball in the driveways. So it was a really nice upbringing, like a very loving upbringing, which I think is important because I grew up in a household of love that allowed me to trust people and see the good in people.
What did your parents do?
My dad worked for Verizon for 35 years doing computer programming, but he studied political science at St. Joe's. So he and my mom they met while working at AT&T. And then, my dad went on to work for Bell Atlantic, and then that turned into Verizon. And my mom became a stay-at-home mom once we had the 3 of us in the family. And then I forget, like she did some odd jobs here and there, and then she became like a cafeteria woman at an elementary school around the corner, Paul Fly Elementary. You might know about it. But and then she was there for like 25 years or something like that, 20 years. So it was great because she would be, I have a lot of respect for your parents as you get older. You start to understand that. Like you think it's easy what they do when you're a kid, but I admire my mom that she would go get us ready, send us off to school, and then she would go work. And then she would be back in time for us to be back from school. And she'd have like apple slices cut up with peanut butter and stuff and helping us study for tests and stuff.
How nice.
Yeah, like I said, very grateful for the upbringing that I've had.
So you were going to comment on your siblings. I wonder, as the youngest boy in the household, what was that like?
I think it was good. I mean, I got along well with my sister. I feel like she and I had a tight bond. And then I got along well with my brother. Like, we did a lot of stuff together. I also got beat up a lot by him. And it was just, now my sister has 2 boys and they're the same age difference as me and my brother. And she's like, did they fight like this all the time? And
I love that.
My mom's like, yeah, of course they did. And we just fought for sport. Like, there was no rhyme or reason we weren't mad at each other. But yeah, we a lot of video games together. You know, my sister was always like, when she was in high school, we were in grade school. When she was in college, we were in high school. So she was like upstairs with her landline phone talking to her friends, you know, and we would be playing like Crash Bandicoot on PlayStation. But yeah, we had a lot of like FIFA. And then, yeah, if I won, I would get beat up. But we also played a lot of ping pong together. And yeah, I'm still tight with my siblings now. My sister lives in my hometown still, like 5 minutes from my parents. My brother lives in New York City with his wife, and they're like a very strong kind of always together on Thanksgiving, always together for the holidays and Christmas. So
as you reflect back and you think about your upbringing, were there any influences early on that contributed to the degree that you pursued and ultimately the choice where you went to college?
Yeah, both my siblings went to Penn State, so I followed suit. And when we dropped my sister off, I was in 7th grade, and I remember moving her into her freshman dorm. And while she was getting her room ready, my dad took my brother and I around campus, and he just showed us the campus, and I was like, "Oh, this is exactly what a college is supposed to be like. It's just what I imagined it should be like." And part of me was like, okay, well, I want to be a little bit of a rebel and do something different than both my siblings did. But I couldn't deny how much I enjoyed Penn State. So it was my top choice. The only other school I applied to was UNC. I didn't get in there, which made my choice very easy.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that because, so I'm just thinking my daughter is a senior at Penn State this year. And my youngest son, it's an 8-year gap between the two of them. And he, similarly to you, went with my daughter Rachel to, that orientation as a freshman. And we were there, and having him see the campus that first trip, he's already locked in. He wants to go to Penn State. So it's, I can completely relate to that story.
Yeah, it's nice. And then I think one of the benefits of being the youngest is you get to see the moves that your siblings make before you have to make them yourself. So that also carried over into degrees. My sister studied marketing, and then my brother studied finance. And I know if you had asked me in high school what I wanted to do, I would say that I wanted to own my own business. I didn't know in what, but I worked at Chick-fil-A when I was 14. And then my sophomore year of high school, I started working in a financial advisor's office. And I guess that was somewhat of an influence, but more so for entrepreneurship than finance. But I ended up studying finance at Penn State and minoring in accounting and entrepreneurship. And I think I did have some interest. Like, it would have been cool. I remember asking my advisor if I could combine music and business in some capacity, which now to me very obviously would be a music business degree. But I guess Penn State didn't have that at the time, so it wasn't an option. Then I thought about advertising because I've always been creative. I thought about supply chain because their program was really good at the time. And ultimately I was like, I'm going to have student loans. I'm going to come out of school. I want to make a lot of money. I don't want to have a ceiling on how much money I can make. And I think finance is a good thing that would be good for me to go into. So it was much more of a logical than a passionate decision.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. I feel like so many people that I talk to, money and finance is the driver for the reason that they choose the career that they choose, versus in some cases it may be ultimately a passion that they want to pursue, but they pick something that's motivated by the earning potential. And I wonder, when you reflect back, how that's played out. Do you think you would have chosen a different field in terms of the degree, or do you feel like that degree ultimately contributed to the success that you have today?
I think it did contribute to the success that I had today because I came out of school working for Deloitte Consulting. I had a great salary coming out of school, great benefits. I was living at my parents' and traveling all the time, so my meals and everything were expensed, and I was able to pay off my student loans within like 3 years. And getting paid well and then also not having living expenses was extremely helpful. But I was only there for a year and 3 months, and I think my approach to studying finance was, even if I'm not working in this field, I can do personal finance and like think about it for myself. And I think that has been true. Like it's been a whole entrepreneurial journey to get to a place of stability with my project. But I feel like this year is the first year that I've been financially stable since starting it. But I'm not someone who's making money now and being like, oh, I can afford to buy these clothes and I can get this nice car. To me, I'm like, well, how much am I getting paid for my interest each month? Okay, well, how can I cover 1 month of rent with my interest? How can I cover 2 months of rent? What does my Roth IRA look like? And so I'm just still financially brained, I guess, when it comes to handling my money. And I want my money to work for me. So I feel like there's a lot of people in the creative world who, if they're like a musician or whatever, they can get so into the creative side and they struggle with the business side. But I feel like having the business foundation first really helped me go and allow myself creative self to create, knowing that I was going to have to reel it in eventually to have it be a long-term thing.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So what was it about the job at Deloitte that you loved and you didn't like?
I loved the people from my analyst class. They were really cool, very smart kids. I was in the Philly office, so my colleagues were Villanova grads, Lehigh grads, Penn grads, Harvard grads, Penn State, and they were great. I mean, such smart people, and it's cool to see them dive in. I didn't like it at the time, but I can appreciate it. Deloitte made me a much more detail-oriented person because I'm a dreamer. I'm like, hey, I'm going to meet 10,000 different people and I'll figure out the details along the way. But in Deloitte, if you did so AIG was one of my clients. We were doing a data modeling project for them. And in the PowerPoint presentation where we'd have to present like the progress reports or whatever, the project management, my manager was like, this is not AIG blue. The RGB of this is not the same as the previous slide. And you're like, it's to the naked eye, it's the same thing. It's like,
I love that.
No one is looking at it being like, it's not the same. But she's like, no, it's not AIG blue. You have to change it in every other slide and make sure that it's consistent. And they would know, like, the Deloitte logo on this slide is a hair off from where it is on this slide. This bullet point is not aligned with this bullet point. So everything had to be perfect. And so I started to be that way. And now that I do keynote presentations, I had someone help me with my keynote and things were not formatted. And I was like, how do you not see this? I see this very easily. So it just made me focus more on the details. And I think it was a good reference point for working hard, because I say now, like at Deloitte, it's not a 9 to 5, it's an 8 a.m. to question mark. Some days ended at 8 p.m., some days it ended at 6 p.m., some ended at midnight, some ended at 3 a.m. and some went into the weekend. And I think for that to be my intro, when I went from that to tech startup, like we were working there typically 8 to 6. And for some people that was longer than they were used to. But for me, I was like, this is nice. We have time to do stuff outside of work. So it helped me frame my professional life in a good way.
I love that. So I want to reflect back for a second, because when you shared this whole sort of work culture at Deloitte, where dotting the I's and crossing the T's was, so pronounced in terms of how detailed they were. And I think sometimes, like, I love the fact that you leaned into that and you kind of embraced the work culture there, while it may not have aligned with how you kind of view the world. I feel like so many college grads today go into a work culture where they may not necessarily align with how the company operates, and they're
Mm-hmm.
quick to dismiss and want to make a change.
Sure.
And I love the fact that you embrace that. And as you're reflecting back, you recognize how that skill, that discipline allows you to show up better in the work that you do today in your company. And I wonder if you could share your thoughts about that and that life lesson.
Yeah, it's interesting because I did embrace it to an extent, and then I also rejected it to an extent, which is why I left after a year and 3 months. And I think it's one of those things now where I can appreciate how it benefited me. But because I always say, like, at that time, I struggled with not eating lunch until my manager ate lunch. And it's not like I would never actually go out of it. I played the game the way that it was supposed to be played. And I understood the hierarchy of Deloitte and that you have to work your way up in that environment.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I also struggled with the fact that I was seeing startups run by people my age who were getting millions of dollars in funding. And it was like they took a chance on their ideas, like Snapchat or Instagram or whatever. I feel like there's so many things coming out at that time, and these people were sometimes the same age as me. So I felt like I was being limited on my potential of what I could do, because like I wanted to have big ideas as well, but they're like, no, you don't do big ideas yet. You do notes on calls, you do the formatting of the PowerPoint slides, you do like the RFPs, you put them together. So I think that was partially why I ended up leaving to go to a startup. Because the other thing is, I was coming from Penn State, where I was really involved and on the exec board of clubs there. So I went from a community where I felt like I was making a big impact and I had the power to do that, into a place where I felt limited, and I felt like I needed to get back to a place where I could have an impact at whatever pace I wanted to do. So it was a bit of both.
Yeah, it sounds like you were put into a box, and it was very restrictive, that kind of limited you. And I think about like your clocking out story. I feel like there's two stories of your journey. And I wonder if you could share a little bit more insight into what ultimately led you to clocking out of Deloitte and pursuing what I think is the next position, which was a BDR role that
Yeah.
completely blows my mind, by the way. But I wonder if you could share a little detail around that first clocking out story that led you to leaving Deloitte.
Yeah, I was never intending to leave Deloitte. Like, I thought I was going to be there for 7 years because I was a business analyst in their strategy and operations consulting practice. And like in that path, you do 2 years as an analyst, you do one as a consultant, you apply to business schools, you get into like a Harvard or Wharton or University of Chicago, whatever. You go for 2 years and then you commit 2 years back to the firm for them to pay it off. And at that time, the prestige of a Wharton or like an Ivy League education on my resume meant a lot to me. So I was like, and Deloitte was one of the only companies that was paying 100% of the tuition. So I was like, I'm definitely not leaving this opportunity on the table. And then fast forward a year and 3 months into it, I was on a project in Kentucky, and the senior consultant used to fly up from Houston, and I would fly from Philly every week. And just through our late nights, I was talking to him about my interest in entrepreneurship. And he said, you should talk to my friend Ben. He's the director of sales at a startup in Philly. And I thought, that's cool. So he put us in touch, and I talked to Ben. And Ben had gone from private equity into the startup world. And I just said, hey, it'd be cool to chat with you because I'm not trying to join your company or anything, but I think I could see myself making a similar leap sometime in the future. And I just want to hear about your experience. So talked to Ben. It went well. Turns out he's just building the sales team at the time. And it was a data analytics company. And at that time, all the partners at Deloitte were raving about the software Tableau, which was better than Excel and charts and dashboards and stuff. And this startup was basically Tableau, but for small to mid-sized businesses. So I was thinking, if the partners are really raving about this, and then this company is doing it for other smaller to mid-sized companies, I feel like they're going to take off. And they already had 6.5 million in funding when I talked to Ben. And so I decided to interview there. Interview went well, but they were like, hey, we'll let you know. And months had gone by. And at this point, I was working on a project in New York City where my girlfriend at the time lived. Mm-hmm. So I was in no rush to get out of there. And then I checked TechCrunch one day, and it said RJ Metrics announces Series B of 16.5 million. And I emailed the guys that I interviewed with, and I said, hey, congrats, I saw the article. And they said, hey, it's time for you to join us. So I just was not seeking to leave Deloitte, but this opportunity came up that I didn't not want to take advantage of.
That must have been such a hard decision. I mean, it feels like it was an emotional decision, because I can only imagine you're sitting there and you had this conversation with Ben, and he shares the excitement of this new company, product innovation, and you don't want to miss out on the opportunity. And when that funding comes in of the 16 million, and they were like, we're ready for you to join, you were probably like, where do I sign?
Yeah, I was excited for it. And in my mind, like, there was no, because my parents were like, why would you leave the security of Deloitte and a paid for MBA? I had to pay back $5,000 of a bonus to take a pay cut to go to the tech startup. And that logically didn't make sense for them, which makes sense.
Well, it's your parents who, I mean, I can only imagine, your dad's with Verizon for 30 years, yeah, and you're worked really hard to get your degree, and you're working with one of the largest, management consulting companies in the world. And it's like your ticket is written at this stage of the game. And you're like, I think I'm going to go to work for this startup company. And they were probably like, have you lost your mind?
Yeah. And I feel like too, I was early-ish in the generation of job hoppers. Like, right. When I graduated and went to Deloitte, it still wasn't a popular thing to leave after 2 to 3 years. And now I feel like everyone does that. But yeah, but I had total confidence in it at the time. I didn't have to write out like a list of pros and cons. I didn't have to weigh the options. It was very much like I think I'll go here. Okay, I'm going to do it. Because I, at that point, had already built up a lot of trust in myself and my discipline and my ability to succeed. So I rested on that a little bit.
Yeah, rightfully so. So you have to tell me where I read this from. You said that there was a level of frustration at one point because one of the people that you had either emailed or connected with told you to take me off of your mailing list, cockroach.
Oh yeah.
And then there was another one who said, I'm not interested and you're really starting to annoy me, ! So it was sort of like, I guess sales is hard, right? Like for you to make that leap of faith and from business analyst to a sales role, there is, it's just not cut out for everyone. I wonder if there was a point where you decided that this wasn't for me. I feel like it's like your next clocking out, which led you to your project. But tell me about the moment where you sort of had an aha that this wasn't working.
Yeah, I mean, that wasn't even, again, it wasn't really something that I sought to leave because those emails didn't bother me. I just thought they were funny more than anything else. And yeah, I think I have that in the About Me section of my site now. And yeah, there was a woman who, because they'd be like, oh, we're not interested. Oh, okay, well, what needs to change before you might be interested? And I sent that back to her, and she was like, if you ask me out on a date and I say no, you do not follow up again. You certainly don't ask me what needs to change. And I was like, all right, well, that's you. So
I love that.
Yeah, but it was, I mean, the startup was going well until we grew from 80 employees to 125 employees in just over a year. It was the right space and the right time. Data analytics was taking off. And in February of 2020, I guess our product had started to stall compared to our competitors. So we were in a space, and our co-founders were very transparent with us. Like, we either take on additional venture funding and really try to push through, or we try to make the product a lot better and just start to make more sales, or we try to position ourselves for a sale of the company and kind of like get out while we're ahead. And so they laid off 20% of the company in February of 2016. And I had already started this project at that point. I started this in November of 2015.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't really like I want to get out of here immediately. It was more so I want to do my own entrepreneurial endeavor, and I'm just going to do it alongside work. And I met one person in all of November of 2015, and then I met 3 people that December and 3 that January. So it wasn't like it was a huge time suck at that point. But yeah, when they laid off 20% of the company in 2016, I was like, oh, my first thought was, oh, cool, I'll just jump into my project full time. Mm-hmm. And then as they were announcing the layoffs, one of the guys on my team messaged me and was like, you're safe, they're keeping you. So I stayed with them. But at that point, I knew that they were trying to position themselves to be sold to a bigger company. And I thought, I'm not interested in working for a bigger company. If I am going to do that, I'm going to go back to Deloitte and I'm going to make a lot more money and just hate my life that way. Mm-hmm. So I started to take full hour lunch breaks and meet people during those hours. And I started to leave at 5 p.m. on the dot and meet people. And I just became a little more liberal in investing into me because there wasn't really a future there for me. Mm. Yeah, that was kind of like the where the tide started to shift a little bit.
Yeah, and what I read also on your site, and I'd love to hear you comment, because I feel like people who are thinking about making a pivot, whether it's while they're working and taking on a project, in your particular case, it felt like you wanted to take the opportunity to meet people on your terms and mm-hmm. to meet people who were genuinely wanting to meet you and also share their story. And which was vastly different than trying to connect with a prospective buyer of a product who has absolutely no interest in making a connection with you. And I wonder if that was ultimately the decision point that caused you to really go all in to your project versus the sales role.
Yeah, it's more like an observation, and it must have been that February of 2015, because I went and saw the Chainsmokers, the DJ duo, in concert. Mm-hmm. It was Halloween, and it was the contrast between like people being so excited to be there and see them, and we had all paid money to go spend time to be with these people. And then on Monday morning, I went to my email where people were telling me I was a cockroach or they didn't want to hear from me or whatever. And I think I woke up to that contrast of, oh, it'd be nice to meet people in a situation where they want to be around me. Mm-hmm. And so that was kind of something that pushed me into starting the project. And in general, too, I think that was one of my frustrations with both Deloitte and the sales world was you were only connecting with people when there was agenda. So the authenticity was never there. And if I reflected back on my time at Penn State, the value that I got out of my Penn State experience was not my finance degree. It was the people that I met there and the memories that I created with them. Mm. And I didn't want that to stop just because college stopped. So I think I just got to a point where I was like, just start the project. And the stakes were so low in 2015. If I had met 10 people and decided I don't want to do this, no one knew about it anyway. So it's not like, I think a lot of people fear that too. They fear starting because they think everyone's going to pay attention to them. And if it doesn't work, or if they need to stop for whatever reason, everyone's going to like be disappointed in them or rag on them or whatever. But it's been interesting building this, because it's like, especially in today's day and age, you have to compete so hard for people to pay attention and care about you. Mm-hmm. So you might as well just start building it while it's not perfect, and then learn what you don't know, because you don't know what you don't know. And you won't be able to figure that out until you cross that bridge. Like, until you come face to face with those moments, then you're not going to know what skill you need. So if you start, then you can figure it out along the way.
Right. I love that. And your first conversation was November 11th,
Mm-hmm.
2015. And you said you had a one or two in November, you had three in December, you had a couple in January, and now it's 2016. At what point did you realize, like you talk about crossing the bridge, at what point did you realize that it's time for me to separate from RJ Metrics and this project is really going to be my full-time gig?
Yeah, when they laid me off.
Well, that will do it.
Yeah.
When was that? What was that like? Oh my gosh.
It was fine because I kind of knew it was coming. Like, again, our co-founders were transparent with us, which was really nice. And so, and at that point, it was like, okay, I'm not going to quit because I want to have a severance package. So I'm just going to wait until they lay me off. And so the company was officially acquired July of 2016, but they laid us off at the end of June of 2016. So I think June 27th of 2016 was my first day of doing this project full time. And leading up to that, like that May, I had some validation that made me feel like, okay, I can try this out full time. So I was the Philadelphia Citizen, which is a local publication, wrote a story on me, and a lot of people read it and enjoyed it. And then PHL 17 did a local TV spot on me. And then there was a blog called Geekadelphia, and then Technically Philly, another publication. So I was like, oh, this concept is interesting to people, and people were starting to reach out to me. And it's cool because like I've since been on Kelly Clarkson's talk show and I've done the Today Show and stuff, but the Philadelphia Citizen writing an article on me, I felt like I was famous because I had not had that experience before. And I feel like the first time you get press, I was like, oh, I'm not going to be able to walk around the city without people running into me. And then no one knew who I was because it was just a small article, but it gave me that boost of confidence that I needed to say, okay, I can do this. And my mentality when I was laid off was I'll do it full time for 2 to 3 months. And if it's going well, I'll continue. And if not, then I'll go back to Deloitte, KPMG, PwC, whatever. And
yeah, that's interesting how your mindset, you have that plan A, plan B, which is you set a metric and a goal for your plan A. And if you're able to achieve that 3 month, that 6 month, that year, you keep on going.
yeah.
And even if there's a moment, and I wonder if there is a moment with your interviews where you almost question, like, is it time? Like, was there a moment that maybe was an external factor that impacted your business and the growth of your connections that sort of you were like, you know what, that plan B is starting to look like a reality? And or was it always everything sort of progressed nicely and the idea of a plan B wasn't even an issue?
Yeah, that's a good question because it was both. I mean, 2 to 3 months came and went. And then I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to continue doing it. And it was growing. It was like the number of people who were following me on social media was growing. In March of 2017, I was able to do my first partnership, which was the guy gave me $300 to tag Fishtown Pharmacy in every post. It's a pharmacy here in Philly. And there's just a nice dude. And he was like, I really wish I could support you. I think what you're doing is so cool. And I kind of had people have always had that attitude towards my project. I think because they could see the genuine nature of it. And the people who were part of it wanted to see it continue. So, and it was like March 10th. And I told him, if you want to sponsor me for the rest of this month, give me like $200. I'll tag you in every post for the rest of the month. And he said, we'll do 300 and we'll call it a deal. So it was like that type of experience where he gave me an extra $100 that I didn't ask for just because he wanted to help me. And so after May of 2017, my lease in Philly was up. So I had to make a move and I knew I wasn't going to continue doing this full time. So fortunately, my one roommate from senior year at Penn State had moved out to Los Angeles. And it was kind of a situation of me being like, hey, I have the flexibility to go wherever. I can come visit you for a little bit and just crash and meet people in Los Angeles. I can do this wherever. And he was like, yeah, come stay as long as you want to. And he didn't charge me rent. And I ended up going to live with him for the summer of 2017. And at that point, my mindset was, all right, LA is make or break. Something has to happen here. If not, then I got to come back and I got to go back into doing a job or whatever. So then I went out to LA and then nothing happened other than me just continuing the project. And I came back and I said, okay, I just got to go to the end of the year. And I think the further I went, it wasn't like any big moment or anything like that. It was just the further I walked along the path, the more committed to it I became. And then that kind of combined with people being like, you should stop this, you should get a job. I was like, nah, I think I'll dive further into this, because if people don't think that I can do it, then there's a sense of proving people wrong as well. Yeah. And I always believed that it was always going to work. It was just a matter of how and when, and in terms of working, being like getting to financial stability. So I just had to walk down the path long enough to figure it out and like survive. And I was extremely frugal as well. That's a whole other piece, and I'm sure you know from your business too. Like it's
the bootstrapping is a real thing, and especially in your case, you're building a community of people that aren't paying you. They're paying you with their time.
Yeah,
which is an interesting currency. But your business of Rob's 10K Friends was an idea for you to connect with 10,000 people. And I wonder when that currency of time translated into currency where you started to get interest on speaking gigs. And because I feel like people are listening to this and they're like, okay, I can go and meet 10,000 people. I can have 10,000 conversations. Obviously, there's a genuineness about how you're connecting with people. And I've had the pleasure of seeing you speak. So I know how you're relating that to the business world and how these conversations can impact your career, your leadership in a company, and how companies actually run themselves. But I'm curious at what point within, and I know you're in the 6,000s today, but was there a number where it was sort of like, okay, I can see this being a business versus a hobby?
Well, I always thought that it would be a business in terms of being like a content creator and that I would do these partnerships. So in that aspect, I was paid in March of 2017. And then I did have other partnerships, like because I started to post presented this month by Fishtown Pharmacy. Then this company Vibe Urgent Care, which was new to the city at the time, their CEO messaged me and was like, hey, I see you're doing this partnership. Can you tell me more about it? And then I met with him for my project. And then in our meeting, he was like, I think I'd like to partner with you for next month. And then the next month was presented this month by Vibe Urgent Care. And then during that month, I went to the dentist at Teen Dental in Northern Liberties. And my dentist, who was part of my project, was like, why didn't you ask me to partner with you? I would have loved to partner with you. And so then he became my partner for the next month. And it just kind of went in that way. And I thought that as my following grew on social media, and as the media stories that were being done on me grew, that the size of the partnerships and the brands would grow as well, and like the money that I would make from it.
That's great.
Yeah. But what I didn't account for is, I think a lot of content creators who do partnerships, they'll make like a post about a product, or they'll make a post about a hotel that they went to. I don't want to do that. I just want to focus on the people that I'm meeting. So, and now there's a little bit of leeway with like Instagram stories and Instagram reels, but every post of mine was a story of someone that I'd met. And I stuck to that very strictly. And so, and I also didn't care if people followed my project, and I didn't care if I was getting a ton of likes and a ton of comments. And if I wanted to do that, I would write people's stories in a much different way. I would pull out the sensational parts of them and just put that out for people to see. But I don't want to sensationalize people. Social media has done that enough. Like, I want to show the wholesome reality of people. So the partnerships kind of fell away. The biggest one I did was with WeWork, the co-working space so after I was on Ryan Seacrest's radio show in 2018, using my sales experience, I took that clip and I sent it to the head of partnerships at WeWork. I was like, hey, I've met a lot of people from your community. They love what I'm doing. I'm getting a lot of press on my project. Here's Ryan Seacrest talking about it last month. I'd love to do a partnership with you. And then that led to a 9-month partnership in 2019. It ended March 11th of 2020. So there was no way it was continuing.
Right.
And then, but in August of 2019, I met this girl, Michelle Poehler, who's a public speaker. And then she was the one who really inspired me to get into speaking, because she told me that she was doing really well with it. And she said there was space for me in the industry. And that was the first time that I really thought, okay, there's a path here. But then I didn't do my first paid speech until April of 2021. So it was still like a year and a half.
Yeah. Yeah. I have to go back just for a second and just really highlight the storytelling component of the work that you do. I was number 6346, like I said, 2 months ago. And I was completely blown away about how we did an hour interview. You took no notes. You didn't have a pen. You didn't have your phone taking notes or even record the interview. And when I went back and I read what you wrote on the Instagram post, I said to myself, how did he retain all of that information? I know I'm not the first person to say this to you, but I think it's really interesting for people who follow you on Instagram to really get a sense of how you're such a great listener. And I think that comes through obviously in your presentations around when you're connecting with people, really listening to their story allows you to have that kind of connection that's genuine. So I just want to say kudos for that. And I really appreciated that you're such a great listener.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that, because hearing that feedback to me is much better than any amount of likes or comments that I could get.
Absolutely.
So I tell people, like, the audience that I write for is the person I'm meeting. And beyond that, I hope it connects with the rest of the people. But the main audience is the person that I've met, because it's their story.
I love that.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about your project for people who are hearing it for the first time. It's Rob's 10K Friends, and your goal is to meet 10,000 people, spend 1 hour with them to learn about their lives. And I wonder if you can share in your own words, when you hit the 10,000 and you're at in the 6,000 now, what's next, and what is the desired outcome that you have with the project?
Yeah. I don't know what the desired outcome is. It's the journey, not the destination. And I think a lot of people get tripped up on that. And I used to think that too. Like, I would talk to musicians and be like, oh, your goal must be to sell out Madison Square Garden someday. It must be to do this big thing. And then you meet musicians who are like, nah, I just want to play music, and I'd be fine being in a cover band and just making enough to live my life, or writing behind the scenes. And I feel like that's how I knew I was passionate about what I was doing, because it's like, I just want to do it. And my curiosity is what happens when you meet someone one-on-one, or 10,000 people one-on-one for 1 hour each. And it's so cool to see all the stuff that has already happened from the project. And I'm only 64% of the way through. And like, to me, that's the great adventure. Is I don't know what's going to happen with the next 3,500 people. They're like, now I feel like it's harder to get people to meet now than it was when I had only met 600 people, which is crazy, because you'd think that, oh, you're 6,500 people in, people would be like, oh, people are knocking down your door to get the chance to meet or whatever. But the landscape of social media has changed. And then we had COVID, and then the way the connection, that's changed too. And I'm kind of like zen about it. I'm like, it's neither here nor there, but it's interesting to observe that this is a chapter of the project that it's harder to get to people to meet now. But that's part of the overall story. And that's what makes it interesting. So I think it'll take like 7 more years to complete. If I meet like 500 people a year, I'm on pace to meet about 600 this year.
Wow.
And hopefully I'll just stick to that. But yeah, 7 more years.
I love that. I love that you've put a pin there, because I was curious about when that period of time would occur. And I wonder if one of your two siblings would be like number 999 and 10,000. But anyway, you don't have to answer that question. But the thing that I want to say as we're wrapping up, I love that you're trusting the process. I can
Mm-hmm.
completely relate to this. I started this podcast just a few months ago, and I have no idea what the outcome is going to be. I've been in the career space for over a decade now. I help people find their dream job, to find ultimate career fulfillment in it. Obviously, you found that, which is so cool. And yeah, I have no idea what the outcome is, but just showing up and having conversations with people like yourself who are making an impact in the world and ultimately living their best life
Yeah.
is what I'm getting satisfaction out of this. And so for you, trusting the process and just being like, hey, if I'm genuine and with the work that I'm doing, you'll always be surprised with the nuggets that you get along the way, whether it's paid speaking gigs, whether
Yeah.
it's a sponsor. So kudos to you for everything that you're doing. And I have to say, I'm just, first of all, just incredibly grateful that you've carved out an hour, Rob. It's already been an hour, if you can believe it, that, give just the gift of your time today really
Yeah.
means a lot to me. I really appreciate it. I know you're super busy with everything that you're doing, and being a part of this show is means a lot. And I think people will enjoy hearing your story. I know we'll have all of your social media things in there in terms of the show notes, but what's the best way people can find you today? Is it Instagram?
Yeah. And if they want to be part of the project, I would be more than happy to meet with them. Yeah, you mentioned it, but my handle's Rob's 10K friends, and it's as easy as sending a message. And I'm not looking for like particularly interesting people. I don't care what people do or whatever. I'm just looking for everyday people to meet. So if they want to spend the time, an hour with someone new, I'm here to do that. And then, of course, if anyone is interested in speaking things, I do all that at my website, roblawless.com.
Nice.
And that's just where that whole side of my life exists. My life is like this cool marriage between the two now, and they go hand in hand with each other. So
Awesome.
yeah. And yeah, thank you for giving me the time to share my story. Knowing your story, because we took the time to get to know each other. I know that you're a busy person as well. So very cool to see what you've done in your career, and I appreciate you giving me the chance to share a little bit about mine.
Awesome. Yeah, it's my pleasure. Well, good. Well, with that, thanks everyone for tuning in. Appreciate you listening to Rob's story. And until next time. Hello, Raymond again here. Thank you again to our sponsor, Careerminds, a global provider of outplacement and leadership development services. You can learn more about Careerminds at careerminds.com. And if you'd like to connect with me about your own career journey, you can connect with me on LinkedIn as well as Instagram at raymondlee.co. Until next time, remember, if you're stuck or unsure of your career or future and think it's time for a change, I would encourage you to ask yourself these 3 questions. Does my career or work make me feel alive? Am I doing the things that matter to me most? And am I creating value for myself and for others? Until next time.